much. It's great to be here. And I recognize after lunch might be a bit heavy now, so I'll try to keep my energy quite high. It's not my usual gig, but I'm going to see how I get on. So I wear a few different hats. My day job is actually as an investor. So I invest in businesses where at least one of the founders has gone to the London School of Economics, essentially a venture capital fund that are investing very early stage. But the reason I'm here is I started off my life as a FinTech entrepreneur. About 8 years ago, I was raising seed capital for a digital wealth management and investment brokerage business called Scalable Capital. And today that business has about 900,000 clients around the world. And we raised about 300 million in venture capital to get where we are today. And we are live across Europe and in the UK. And we have B2B clients where we deploy our technology in big banks. And then we also have our own clients that we have relationships with. So went on a scale-up journey as a FinTech entrepreneur, but started really enjoying the angel investing and the advising other entrepreneurs part of that journey as we were scaling. And I was fortunate enough that I got introduced to the team that was looking to build out that venture capital fund. And so I ultimately moved on from the company that I founded and handed it over to my co-founders, where they still run it today. But when I did that, I got the opportunity to join another organization called Innovate Finance. Now, Innovate Finance is an organization that I first met back in 2015 at a conference called Web Summit. And at the time, they were very, very early on their journey and have since become the foremost voice for FinTech here in the UK as the industry body. And they wanted me to join that board to bring my founder's perspective to the direction that they were going in. And today it's about a 250-member organization community. And they really do have the priorities of the FinTech industry at heart. And they are the voice in front of all of the important institutions here in the UK and abroad to make sure that FinTechs are getting what they need. And they do, it's a small team and they do a lot, and I'm going to be running through a few of those things today. So essentially there's three pillars to Innovate Finance. On the one hand, they are building a community. So they're making sure that the members are getting together and people who are solving challenges, can help solve those challenges together. And they're regularly hosting events and putting smart people together and really building, as I said, that community. The second is that they really support the industry. So they're always promoting the success stories, the good that's coming out of the FinTech industry. And they really are a promoter of everything that's going on. And then the third is they advocate for the industry, really making sure that legislators, regulators have the FinTech industry in their thoughts and minds when they're thinking about how to shape regulation for the future. And with this small team, they try to do as much as they can. So from a priorities point of view, these are really the 5 key areas that are a focus for everybody involved in Innovate Finance. So I won't go into detail because there's a lot, and there's even more to go through as well. It always just amazes me when you see it on paper how much they're actually doing. But 5 key areas. So one, skills and talent. Making sure that here in the UK we have the right people, the right skills to be able to employ people within the FinTech industry, and for those firms to be able to grow to the scale that they require. So it's really about making sure that we have the right people here to help them to do that, but also making sure that the talent pool which is coming into the FinTech industry is also as diverse and inclusive as possible, and they've got a number of programs that really help on that front as well. From an investment point of view, which obviously is a topic which is close to my heart, given that it's my day job, they work very closely with investors as well as the governments to making sure that the right amount of capital is here in the UK to ensure that FinTechs can call the UK their home and can get the capital they need to be able to scale into global leaders. And we, as investors, are members of this organization, as you can imagine, and they're doing things like, investor matching and workshops to make sure that the FinTech presentations, their pitch decks are really up to scratch, as well as making sure they're kind of very key component to everything that's going on from a investment legislation point of view. For example, the private markets reform with pension funds now going to be allocating a portion of their capital into private companies, which obviously will be a huge benefit for the FinTech sector here in the UK. Third pillar is FinTech for a force for good. FinTech is doing a lot of good in the world. Hopefully I'll get onto a little report that they co-authored with Accenture later on. But FinTech is being used to create a more inclusive, more convenient, more accessible, more cost-effective financial services system to provide better access to more. And so we're doing as much as we can to promote that, specifically, doing work on how FinTech can help with things like the cost of living crisis. I believe over 50% of the lending that happened during the COVID pandemic happened through FinTech organizations, not through the banks themselves. So really highlighting the importance that FinTech has in its role in our modern society. Fourth pillar is regulation. Regulation is always there. The team do a lot to influence and to make sure that all legislation which is here, coming through the pipeline for now in a post-Brexit world, but also in an international level, the voice of FinTech is at the table when those decisions are being made. And then the last thing is international connectivity. So making sure that firms that are based here in the UK are able to connect with their peers around the world, are able to grow into the international jurisdictions that they want to. We have a US program, for example. We have feet on the ground in New York, where we're always ensuring that the UK fintechs have access to that US market. And they're also doing a lot of work right now with Singapore, the government of Singapore, and the country of Singapore to also open up Asia as a growth opportunity for the UK-based fintechs. I can't go into every detail. I don't know every detail about everything, but as you can see, it is a lot. And the only way they can be the voice of fintech here in the UK is by working with their national hub organizations. So Innovate Finance, based down here in London, team is based in the city, and work very, very closely with their peer counterparts around the UK to make sure that it's not just the voice of the fintechs in London being heard, but all around the rest of the country as well. And they also work very closely with academic institutions. So they chaired the launch of the UK FinTech Academic Network last year. That was set up by Innovate Finance as well as Manchester Business School. And I believe they have an annual event or a semi-annual event where they bring together academic institutions here in the UK to discuss important research topics relating to the world of FinTech. And you can find out more about what that's about at that web address. And I believe, it's an annual conference coming up in April. Okay, on to investment. So this is obviously an area that I care deeply about, having been on a journey where we had to raise venture capital. We had to seek, international venture capital to scale our business. And even though the UK is a big part of the overall landscape, it's always interesting to go and look at the data and see what is going on. And Innovate Finance, again, co-authored a paper on what was going on, or like basically looking at the investment landscape in the world of fintech. And as you can see, 2022 is down on 2021. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. If you look at the data for 2023, it pretty much looks the same as well. But 2021 was just the most insane outlier year in terms of the amount of money raised by fintech companies around the world. So peaking at $130 billion in 2021. If we look at that at a country level, the UK is number 2. So outside of the US, which raised about $40 billion in 2022 into fintech companies across nearly 2,000 deals, the UK is a number 2, which I think is pretty impressive. Really goes to show the global standing of the UK when it comes to scaling, launching, building a fintech business, and hence why entities like Innovate Finance so important to what we're doing here in the UK to make sure we can try our best to long may that continue. First half of 2023, a little bit more of the same. Got China and Singapore kind of coming up the league tables. Overall numbers are down again. But the interesting thing is, though, if you annualize those numbers and compare it not to 2021, not to 2020, but back to 2019, you're getting similar numbers again. So we had this very crazy period which lasted 3 or 4 years in and around, obviously, zero interest rates, pandemic, but things are starting to normalize. And although things go down, they're going back down to levels which are a lot more normal than we saw in that brief period of 2 to 3 years. The statistic that we always love to tell, though, is that if you look here, if I go back one, you see the UK second, and you see France down there, 0.7 billion versus the 2.9 that the UK has raised. It actually turns out that the UK has raised more money in fintech businesses than the next 9 European countries combined, which I think is a pretty neat one. Yeah, really just going to show that the UK has been in a fairly strong position, although there's nothing to say that this will continue. So that's why we don't rest on our laurels. This is why we run this series of programs. This is why we help as much as we can to ensure that the UK can remain one of these global powerhouses. It can keep its position as a global leader in fintech. So what else? Continuing on the programming, so from a policy point of view, and again, like we already mentioned that that's a priority area and there's lots going on. If you then double click on that and look, okay, well, what exactly is it that the Innovate Finance are helping with from a policy point of view? These are essentially the key areas right now that small team is working on to make sure that the government is hearing the voice of the industry. It's a team, I think it's a team of 3 internally at Innovate Finance. They're doing this, and they respond to about, I don't know, 50 consultation papers every single year from the FCA, making sure that the voices of the members are part of the direction of where that legislation is going. Every time I see slides like this, I actually can't believe that they do so much for their members. And one of the reasons being is that they have so many different types of members. So we were a member as an investment brokerage business. You have lending businesses, you have crypto businesses, you have digital identity businesses, you have cybersecurity businesses, all working together within the fintech industry, which means from a vertical point of view, there's a lot of coverage from a policy point of view. And so they do as best they can to make sure that everybody is being involved in a relevant way. What else? So this was a report that was put out, as I mentioned, between Accenture and Innovate Finance. This year, it was the first of its kind. So basically, wanting to see what type of impact is the fintech industry having in the world across these 5 pillars. So people, planet, place, productivity, and peace. And for the first time, we were able to quantify across all of these 5 different verticals. And as you can imagine, fintech came out pretty well. The one which actually let itself down on was planet, but hard for fintech to change the world in that way. But across the other 4, got to a point where you can see that has an overall net impact score of 49. Obviously, it's positive, and it's doing pretty well in comparison to a lot of other industries out there, capital markets, for example, traditional financial services industry. So, this is the sort of stuff that we promote, that we want to be promoting, to make sure that people recognize that fintech is here and it's doing a very good thing, as I mentioned, making financial services a lot more accessible, a lot more convenient, and providing just cheaper access to more people, ultimately. But yeah, that's a report, as I mentioned, from Accenture and Innovate Finance called the FinTech Impact Report, if anyone's interested in taking a look at that. What else do we have? They also put out a report in EY with regards to diversity. So looking at the fintech industry, as you can imagine, it's not the most diverse industry, but it's something that we're working on, and we're trying to do as best as we can to make it more diverse, to make it more inclusive. You can see that it is, from a diversity point of view, senior men making up 58% of the industry, senior women only 39%. So yeah, more needs to be done, but this is an area that we're focusing on. In particular, for example, one of the next events that we're putting on at Innovate Finance is called Pride in FinTech. It's coming in December, 4th of December, I believe, is the event, celebrating the Pride leaders within the fintech industry. They recently put out the kind of Pride in FinTech power list, so all of the people that you can see there on the website that you can see below. And they'll be coming together on the 5th of December, sorry, 5th of December, to celebrate, and everybody would be welcome, and please feel free to go on the website and to register. So, I think that is the end of my little overview, very, very high-level overview of all of the activities of Innovate Finance. Hopefully it gives you a good indication of what we're up to, what the priorities are, why we exist, what we do for our members, and ultimately, if you want to learn more, please reach out. It's a really cool community of about 250 organizations, really promoting the best interests of everything that's going on in FinTech here in the UK. So thank you very much. And I think we might have time for some questions, so happy to take some, if there are any.
We do have some time for some questions. If anyone has a question, if you want to put your hand up, please, and we'll get a microphone out to you. I also have some questions here as well. Sorry, 1 second.
I can take questions about Innovate Finance or my business, Scalable Capital, or my investment firm, Houghton Street Ventures.
Okay, so here's some questions that are coming from our virtual audience. Thank you for sending these in. What are some of the key factors that contribute to the thriving fintech ecosystem in the UK? Why is it so strong?
Yeah, I think it's built off the back of a strong financial services industry historically. London in the UK is just very well positioned to serve the global finance community. And it has all of the elements needed to therefore build a thriving fintech community. It has talent that knows how to solve the big problems. It has access to capital that are willing to, be deployed into businesses that are looking to build in this space. And historically has had access to a very, very big global market. So fantastic ingredients to be able to, to make the fintech industry kind of, in London, in the UK, its home. But it doesn't always have to be that way, which is why things like this are so important. But those key ingredients definitely have been there over the last decade or so.
Well, yeah, and some of your slides showed that the UK does have a healthy lead over the rest of the European countries, and as you said, combined. But you seem to suggest that that might not always be the case. So what are the key risks involved in the UK maintaining that position?
Yeah, it's more about making sure that we don't mess this up. You could easily sit there at the top of the mountain and think that's fine for us, we're happy to be number one, whilst everybody else recognizes that this is an opportunity and can build around that and can put in place policy, can put in place opportunities where people will catch up. So for me, it's just making sure that you're constantly striving to make sure that those ingredients always remain, right? And that's why if you look at the priority areas, the key priority areas for Innovate Finance, they sit in those kind of very basic building blocks. At the end of the day, it's about access to talent. Although we have great access to talent today, we want to make sure that we're always improving that. It's about capital investment, because although it's been there historically, we need to make sure that we can do whatever we can do to make sure that it remains here and it builds upon what we already have. And likewise with the international connectivity, there are headwinds that make some of these things harder. Things like Brexit, which have changed the landscape for businesses operating here in the UK who want access to Europe and further abroad. But there are things we can do to make that better and to help fintech firms in other ways. So, it's just making sure that those key pillars always remain, working with everyone to make that happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously aside from, Europe and obviously the US, there are places like the UAE, for instance, that are trying to position themselves as a future hub for fintech. And obviously they make it quite attractive to do business there. And in terms of welcoming talent from all nationalities, they've got a bit of a head start on the UK there. So
healthy competition.
Yeah. So where do you see the competition coming from, for instance? Because obviously we've talked about Europe, and it looks like that's not necessarily going to be the case. But what are the big countries to look out for fintech, do you think? Yeah,
there's kind of three that are in my mind. So one is the UAE. Naturally, it's a fantastic place which have been given a lot of benefits to go there as an entrepreneur and to help build, and access to a global market. Looking both east and west from a geography like that. The other two that I watch with interest. So one is just the US, naturally. It's just massive. From a venture capital point of view, it's always interesting because you've just got access to the biggest consumer market in the world. If you're building consumer fintech over there, you can just scale it so much more easily. So, I think that there will be US fintechs that continue to come over the pond and to build in the UK as well. And it's a natural stop-off point for the European market. Then the third one, and I think about this more often than not at the moment, which is that there is a risk, and it's something we've got to be really careful with, that historically the best French founders founded businesses in London, and the best German founders founded businesses in London because they were here. The most ambitious French people, the most ambitious Germans would come to the UK to start their careers, and they would therefore set up life, and they would set up their businesses here. I wonder if that still holds true. I still wonder, are the ambitious Europeans today, are they sitting in London, or are they choosing to set up business elsewhere, including in their home markets? And that's something that I've been thinking about. And I don't know the answer to that question yet, but it's definitely worth reflecting on.
That's fair. And obviously you've given us quite a good detailed overview of the current picture. But looking further ahead, what emerging trends do you see shaping the future of UK fintech, and how can we capitalise on those opportunities?
Yeah, I'm probably the first person to say these two letters today. I'm assuming it hasn't came up at all. AI, has anyone mentioned it?
Never heard of it.
No. Yeah, look, there's obviously a lot of fluff in it, but there's a lot of talent going into that area today to see how it can improve not just financial services, but everyday life in all sorts of verticals and all sorts of solutions and problems to be solved. I think it would be silly not to think that there's going to be some really fascinating use cases that just make finance more engaging, more human than they have been historically. I do have a counter to that, though, and I spoke about it a few times, which is kind of where do I see my own vision for fintech and financial services. And a lot of people like the idea of providing a service which is more engaging for somebody to understand what's going on in their future with their finances, to kind of create a more human reporting of kind of their day-to-day life. I wonder if actually it looks somewhat different. And the example I always give is Uber. Now, not Uber as a company, but Uber as a proposition. So one thing I think Uber did really well was it just removed the financial transaction element so far away from the customer experience that you almost forget it's there. You forget that you're paying for that taxi when you get out and just leave and get on with your day-to-day life. I do wonder if that's the North Star for where kind of particularly retail-focused financial services gets to, which is to this point where everything is just done in the background, and you don't have to really worry about where your money's going, or where you're saving, or where you're investing, or the lending that you might be doing. You're getting the best rate. You kind of just get on with your day-to-day life, do the stuff that you care about. Family, play, work, whatever it might be, and then something else just deals with everything else. And that could be artificial intelligence ultimately in the background, or that could just be embedded automated finance that's just so far away from the average person. Because we're sitting in this room talking about fintech, and we're nerding out a little bit on the whole thing, but most people hate finance, hate it. And I think if you think about their needs, we probably disappear into the background quite a bit.
Okay, yes, could we get a microphone out here, please? Oh, it's at the back. If you just keep your hand up, please. No, because we need to hear you for the online audience. Thank you. If you can just state your name and where you're from, please, to begin.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, it's Claire Thompson. Nice to meet you, Adam. I was just wondering, from Innovate Finance perspective, how do you engage with education establishments in the UK? And also not just thinking about universities, maybe prior to that, colleges, and then maybe even schools.
Yeah, no, really good question. I can't speak to the specifics, being a non-executive director of the organization, so I'm not deep in the programming. But you saw on the skills and talent slide, there was I don't think they call it Founders for Schools program, but it's like FinTech for Schools skills and talent program. I've been part of a kind of sister group where Innovate Finance, they're either the secretariat or the chair, called FinTech Strategy Group, which is a room of, let's call it 20, 30, 40 high-level fintech executives in the UK across banking and across the technology sector. And one of the first meetings we ever went to was about exactly that. how do we make sure that the 15, 16, 17-year-olds of today have the requisite skills to be able to join a fintech organization and to be able to, work in this modern world. And so there is a lot of pushing that narrative and making sure that the conversations are happening. I believe there is a program that actually they have in place right now where they put fintech organizations in front of young adults and try to give them exposure to a different type of organization that they've probably, their parents haven't been aware of and they've not been given exposure to before. So it is part of the agenda, but I wouldn't be able to talk much to the specifics, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll take one more question quickly if we can get the mic down. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Elena Rivers. Our company actually registered in US and Delaware. And in order to, I am the only one person from the global organization. So in order to work with Innovate Finance in UK, what is the procedure? What is for international company?
Yeah, sure. Reach out. There's an amazing team of directors who'd be happy to understand kind of how we can best help. If it's to do with incorporating here and setting up business here, then that's one element that we can help with. If it's understanding the regulatory landscape and what you'll be getting access to, what you might be having to think a bit more closely about if you're wanting to create a regulated entity here and go after UK-based clients. They can be very, very helpful on that front. They're plugged into everything going on in the UK from a corporate, regulatory, fintech point of view. So it really depends on the need states. But obviously, ultimately depends on your business and what you specifically are looking for by moving. Did I hear US and Bermuda? You said US and? Delaware. Delaware. Yeah, so what would you be looking to get from by either setting up a subsidiary here in the UK or moving a holdco here in the UK? It really depends on exactly the business that you're operating, who your customers are, where you're looking to set up your operations, what would be the advantages, disadvantages. But US isn't a bad option, as you saw, although I wouldn't promote them when I'm wearing my Innovate Finance hat.
Of course you wouldn't, no. Okay, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you, Adam.
Cheers. Thank you.